Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be chatting with you here today, and thanks to ELI for the invitation. As I get my screen pulled up, I'm so sorry, my camera does this sometimes and it goes blurry. But that's okay, we'll be looking at slides anyway. So as I get this pulled up to share with you guys. So I understand and know that your roles are all incredibly technical, but also really vital. I also know how tough it can be to communicate your work in a way that actually lands with the public and with decision makers or even your other colleagues in your other departments. I have always been one of those other colleagues, and often in my line of work in the drinking water industry, chatting with scientists and chemists and engineers, and I'm telling them to dumb it down for me. But then when I got into the technical parts of communications, because communications is also technical and science backed, I learned that I was really saying that wrong. So today we're going to talk about how you simplify, clarify, and energize the way you communicate your science and your work, but without dumbing it down. So I always like to start with why, because until you know why it matters or how it relates to you, you're not really going to listen to anything. So let's face it, we live in a noisy and distracted and often misinformed world. People are scrolling past headlines in a second, and if your message is not clear, if it's not relatable, it's just going to get lost. That's a big problem for us in this industry, for you guys, because your work really matters. And your science protects water, it protects public health, ecosystems, but you're not going to have the ability to have impact if people don't get that message. So facts alone don't change minds, stories do. And we'll kind of talk about that and what that means here in a moment. But before we go any further, the one thing I really want you all to resonate with and agree to in your mind is that your role as a communicator is just as important as your role as a scientist. Now, your role in whatever technical aspect that you do, super important, right? You have all of this expertise in that. But regardless of your title and whether you're a frontline communicator or you're in the lab or you're the CEO or you're engineer, whatever your actual job is, you're also a communicator. We're all communicators. And like I said, our role doing that until we can get across to someone else the importance of what we do or what we're trying to say, if they can't understand that, then kind of our other role in our day-to-day work is not having the impact that it should. So before we get started, and I'll have to open my chat here in a second, but just to kind of understand where you guys are coming from, if you could drop a word, 2 words in the chat, what makes communicating your work hard? And that'll just kind of help me understand a little bit more. Yeah, regulations in the rule language is big. Large, complex data sets, jargon, technical terms. Angry people, we're going to talk about that. So love that you did that. Nuance, complexity, technical minutia, politics. We talk a little bit about that. It's a whole nother lesson. Yeah, balancing the level of detail so it's not overwhelming, misinformation, the math part. So great. Perfect. So this helps me know kind of what to focus on, but all of this that's coming in right now, we're going to get into. So keep that going so you guys can kind of relate to each other and see we're kind of all in the same boat with this. And then just want to tell you how we're going to spend these 90 minutes. I understand that's a long time, so I wanted to break it down for you and let you know kind of what's coming. So it's in 4 areas, but we're really going to focus on the first two. So spend a lengthy amount of time on these and then kind of quick hits on the second two. So when it comes to simplifying our message, how do we communicate this complex science and this regulatory content that you guys are talking about in a clear way, an engaging way, in a way that's accessible to the non-expert audiences, without watering it down, though, and without losing the essential meaning that you need there? And then second, we'll move into understanding your audience and shaping that story. So we'll talk about how to create this communications tool called audience personas to better understand who you're talking to, what points you want to get across, and then tips for tailoring those messages, whether it's to your public audiences or elected officials or the media. And then lastly, we'll kind of quick hit touch on and do some examples of combating incorrect info. What do we do when someone is out there and is actively putting out incorrect information or just has mistakenly put that out? Something we deal with a lot these days. And then some quick tips on interacting on social media. I understand that you might not be the person in your organization doing that, but whatever your role is, we all come across forums or that are companies' public pages, and just people that, sometimes we call them trolls, but people engaging in ways in social media. So it's important to understand kind of how to maintain trust and how to engage kind of in that sphere. So again, with starting with the why, I always like to tell you why something is important before we go into it. This example is a study about drinking water utilities, which I understand most of you are not, but it's still relevant to whatever your entity is. So this is a study the American Water Works Association did, and it found out that customers of utilities that had heard from their utility, I think maybe in the last 12 months, I think it was, were 3 times more likely to say that their water safety had improved. It didn't mean they knew anything about the technical data of their water safety. It's just that they perceived that 3 times more so if they had heard in the last 12 months from the utility. What's super interesting about this stat is that it rang true even if the communication was like a boil water notice, which, can be construed as like a negative type of communication or a water shutoff. Just if they had been communicated with at all, their trust level increased. Similarly, the study found that when a customer was aware of the testing frequency of tap water from their utility, they had all kinds of more positive ratings when it came to their view of tap water. So I know there's a lot on the slide. If you just focus on those last charts, the trust in the utility. If someone was aware of that frequency, so that's like one data point that this customer was educated on, 67% of those types of customers trusted their utility versus 34% who were not aware of that testing frequency. So it just shows you like how impactful this communicating and this outreach can be. Again, so when we're engaging and educating and telling our story, we're gaining trust. We build ambassadors, which we'll talk about the messenger. I think someone in the chat talked about who is giving the message and the challenging of that. A lot of times when we can build ambassadors who are correcting misinformation for us, community members who are trusted already by their community, that's really huge, and that's what we want to do. And all of this leads to us providing better service because when the people we're serving understand what we do better, they engage better, they take the actions that we want better, whether that's, protecting a lake or whatever that is. So some of the tips today are going to help us do these three things on the right that we know we all want to do. So going back to our agenda, when we say simplify, we don't mean oversimplify. So I want to be clear on that because I know that's a challenge for a lot of the work that you guys do. But we do mean clarify, and that means focusing your message, stripping away that jargon, meeting people where they are, but not dumbing it down. So one of the first things I want to talk about is a cognitive bias known as the curse of knowledge. It's one of the biggest traps that we all fall into. It's human nature. It's not just you guys, it's all of us. And it means that when we know so much about our subject, it's really hard to imagine not knowing that. So you guys have been spent years in school, years on the job, have dove deep, more than 10,000 hours makes you an expert on whatever it is you know. And so when you're talking about that with someone else, you're skipping over the basics because you forgot what it was like to not know them. You're using terms that feel normal in your everyday, but sound like foreign languages to everyone else who doesn't study what you study. And so the solution is going to be starting at your audience's level. So again, the definition of the curse of knowledge, it's this cognitive bias, and it happens when you forget what it's like to not know something. And so you're unconsciously assuming that others have that background and that context and the technical understanding you do. And again, this is unconsciously, right? So it would be easy if we all knew we were doing this. Most of the time, we don't realize we're talking at that level. So scientists and technical experts often fall into this trap, particularly because we're using those jargon, those acronyms, and we are just over explaining everything in overwhelmingly detail. that confuses our audiences. So for example, a scientist might talk about nutrient load reduction in impaired water bodies under a TMDL framework. And everybody on this call understood what that meant. Probably like no 10 random people you walk up to in the street, not a single one of them would understand what the heck any of that meant. All the public wants to know about when that topic is being discussed is, okay, so can I swim in that water? Is it safe for my kids? Can I fish in it? What does it mean? So practical tips for this one is always starting at your audience's level. And the basic rule of thumb is at a fifth grade level. I think sometimes we hear that and we think, oh, that means be really dumb. No, fifth graders are really smart. I think there's like a whole show on that. Are you smarter than a fifth grader? But it's just starting at the plain level that someone else who is a technical expert in something else could understand. So we're imagining that they're reasonable, smart adults, but that they didn't study what we studied and that they use everyday plain language. The other thing is to um, strip it down to why it matters to them and using plain language and then layer on those details only if the audience asks for it or needs it. So I think one of you guys talked about the complication is like you have so much you need to share. We're going to talk about over the next little bit how to really figure out what is the main thing you actually need to share. How do you focus it on what they want to know and care about? And then you can always supplement that extra detail, if they're asking questions, if you're in in-depth conversation, or having it, let's say it's a written communication, having that later in the document. So if people want to read down that far, they can go get more. But when we start, how do we talk about what matters most to them and do that plainly? So there's some other techniques we'll go into about that. This is the last time I swear to you that I use drinking water examples. I'm used to talking about utilities and talking to utilities a lot. Later, I use examples more pertinent probably to a lot of your work. But sorry, I'm trying to read the chat now, so I'm going to close it so that I don't because I always want to. Yeah, so it's about switching from this technical mindset to a conversational mindset. A lot of times this helps to think about if you're talking to your neighbor or you're talking to your kid, whether that's an adult kid or junior high kid. So one of your messages as a water utility, for example, to your customer might be, I want to talk to you about lead in your drinking water. But what your customer heard was, there's lead in my drinking water? You automatically just alarmed them. And by the way, I know my biggest thing I say to utilities is, first of all, there's lead in pipes potentially that transport your drinking water. There was not lead like in the water when it left the treatment plant. So you might want to talk about our research shows levels of PFOA at 8 parts per trillion. Nobody understood that. Like, can I drink the water? Is it safe? What does that mean? We might want to talk about, oh my gosh, I've seen this go out a million times when we're notifying like neighborhoods. We'll commence with a $5 million project to install a 20-inch pipe on your street. First of all, some of these details we put out are not pertinent. So all I care about, so does that mean is my street gonna be blocked? Are my kids gonna get to school late? Am I gonna have water service uninterrupted this whole time? $5 million sounds like a lot. Is my bill gonna go up? When we communicated that, we were communicating based on our interests. We have this project. We need to let people know. We weren't thinking at all about the people we were talking to and what they care about. Another thing in that industry they say a lot is, I need you to flush your lines. Nobody talks like that. Does that mean flush the toilet? Like no one talks about flush your lines. So those are just some things to think about of how to turn what you're trying to say into more conversational of what you would say to someone on the street. So 3 strategies to simplify your communications. We're going to talk about the one thing rule, the CAP method, which is my favorite, and then the 2793 rule. That last one we're going to practice in the chat. I swear it's not hard. I'm not having you practice the hard ones. So just be thinking about that coming up. So the one thing rule, if your audience remembers just one thing, what should it be? So this rule forces you to prioritize. Instead of trying to tell them everything, tell them what's most important and say it in one clear, compelling sentence. Again, this sounds so simple that you're like, oh, Chelsea, duh, I knew that. But we don't practice it. So it's really important to practice it. When we have a crisis maybe going on, or we have a new project, or we have a public meeting about X topic. Imagine before you go out there, if you had to summarize that into one sentence, what would it be and what would you say? So when we're trying to do this, and when you're trying to practice this at home, because you'll have these slides, and it is really good to try to practice these things, here are some questions we can ask ourselves. Because people's attention is limited. And in this noisy media world that we talked about, you've got to focus on that one key takeaway and one core message that's going to cut through to them on all those other things going on in their head and competing for their interest. So, what's the most important idea here? What action or feeling do I want them to walk away and leave with? What am I trying to get them to do or trust in or know about? And then again, how do I say that in one sentence? So an example, a lot of times this is what we say. Due to increased nutrient loading from non-point sources, we anticipate an exceedance of algal biomass thresholds in lake blah, blah, blah this summer. Probably many of us in this call have written that sentence almost exactly like that. It doesn't really get across to people who don't speak that kind of language. And a better way is to say, hey, if nothing changes, the lake will likely experience a harmful algae bloom this summer, threatening fish and swimmers. So let's look at why, based on the one thing rule, the first maybe doesn't hit and the second does. One, the first is full of all this jargon and this technical expert language that only you guys know about. You guys are really smart, but nobody talks about non-point sources. Again, I want to do a study. I wish I had done it before this. I want to go outside, ask 10 people if they know what a non-point source is, and I don't think any of the 10 would know that. Increased nutrient loading. Exceedance is even kind of like a word that we don't use in normal day life. And obviously algal biomass thresholds, like what is that? And so the second one worked is one, experience a harmful algae bloom. That's common language. I understand what that means. We know what algae blooms are. And it talks about, oh, that could threaten fish and swimmers. It talks about why they would care. So, okay, now I'm listening if I fish there, if I swim there. If I don't, might be interesting knowledge. I still might move on. But it really points to the why. So that's the one thing rule. Super simple, super easy. This next one is my favorite. It's the CAP method. And so my one thing on this whole presentation, honestly, if you take anything away, I hope it's the CAP method more than anything else we're going to talk about. So CAP stands for care, action, and perspective. And it's a simple formula to structure your message, particularly in times when emotions are high. You've got to first address the anger or fear in someone before they can even hear you. And that's based on science. So I'm excited to talk about science with scientists. So again, like one of my pet peeves, kind of just in my field and industry, is communications is looked at as a soft skill, but all of these strategies are scientifically based and research backed. And so back in 2002, some scientists won the Nobel Prize for research that established when our fight or flight reaction is triggered, we think differently. So the reason I have the amygdala shown here, this is the primitive area of our brain. And when it's triggered, we just go to protecting ourselves. All we can think is fight, flight, or freeze, right? We're all familiar with that. This happens anytime we're stressed out, anytime we're scared, anytime we're angry about something. And so when you're talking to someone in the public, or you're talking to your boss, or you're talking to the mayor, or you're talking to that journalist, and they're angry, they're mad, or they're stressed out, and you're just trying to reason with them, they literally can't comprehend that from you right now. And it's not their fault. I think learning this for me helped me empathize with people of like, oh, well, they literally can't hear my reasonable logic right now. So I've got to use a communication tool to get them back down to a calm level so that I can then reason and we can have that like fact-based conversation. And once I learned it was science, and once I learned it wasn't just them, it's also me. My brain does this and your brain does this. It was kind of life-changing for me. And so just knowing that people don't care how much you know or how right you are until they know how much you care. In this industry, probably in every industry in the professional life, I think we're taught too much that in professional zones, like emotions don't matter and we leave that home and we don't bring that to work. But the science shows that they do matter and they impact how we receive information and how we communicate. So they're really important in this particular strategy. So if you're gonna like take a photo, screenshot anything, I would say this is the one. So CAP method is how we're gonna structure a response when kind of that crisis or threatening situation is going on, when someone's upset or angry or trying to do a gotcha or just overall stressed. So starting with a caring message, and I'll give some examples of these, but starting with the caring message, so indicating that you get it, you're concerned, their feelings are valid, and showing that empathy and compassion. Um, then you're going to go into what you're doing about it. So here's what I'm about to do. Here's what I've already done. We're cooperating with others to do this, or we're investigating the situation. Let them know that you're not just sitting idly by about whatever it is they're concerned about. And then we're going to come in with a perspective message. Most of the time, we're trying to start with the perspective message. We're trying to give context and say, well, hey, this meets all regulatory standards and it's actually safe. In the drinking water industry, utilities do this a lot with discolored water. It's when manganese is in the lake, that's a naturally occurring event and it's safe to drink. Okay, well, what if you go up to somebody with a yellow cup of water and say, oh, yeah, like I know it looks weird, but it's safe to drink? You got to validate first that you completely understand why they don't want to drink that yellow water, what you're doing about it to mitigate the lake turnover event and how it'll clear up soon. And then the perspective, but by the way, it is totally safe, but understand you don't want to drink it. So, walking through some examples for you guys, one you might, work with would be we all want our kids to be able to splash in clean streams and feel safe doing it. That's why we're partnering with local farmers to reduce nutrient runoff. Because when we protect our water, we're protecting public health, wildlife, and our shared future. So why this works is this framing draws in the audience emotionally before you moved into that technical aspect or whatever the policy content, the policy aspect you're trying to communicate. And that's way more effective than just leading with the data. Next, you could say, hey, we've seen a 20% decrease in nutrient runoff due to these efforts. A lot of times, like I said, we want to start with, we've seen a 20% decrease. Well, I don't even know yet why I should care or how it affects me. So I didn't really hear your fact. But if you started out why I should care and how it affects me, then I heard your great statistic of how you've made that reduction. So 3 more examples for you guys, kind of just showing what on the left, what we usually put out, and maybe a better way to do that. On water body assessments and monitoring, we're conducting use support determinations using ambient water quality monitoring data to identify 3 or 3 delisted impaired waters. Like you're probably laughing at me, but like your organization is 1,000% like put out something like that. And I'm sorry, I realize I'm blurry again. So a better way to do that that's gonna land and resonate with whoever you're actually communicating with. Hey, every community deserves clean rivers and lakes where families can fish and boat or simply enjoy the outdoors. We're analyzing data from local monitoring stations to identify waters that need protection or restoration and partnering with local groups to turn that data into action plans. This work helps protect not just the water, but the people and wildlife that depend on it and ensures federal and state resources go where they're needed most. Also, by the way, I realized that on the left is shorter than what I put on the right, and we'll talk about a strategy next about when you need to communicate in shorter and quicker ways. So this one, TMDLs, first of all, nobody but you guys knows what the heck that means. And even if you said total maximum daily load, nobody knows what that means. So if we're trying to say something like we're developing TMDLs for nutrient impaired segments to establish pollutant load allocations between point and non-point sources, consistent with the Clean Water Act, section blah, blah, blah. No one also knows what these point and non-point sources are. So if you start with, hey, no one wants to live near a river choked with algae or where fish are dying because the water's out of balance. So we're using science to figure out how much pollution a river can handle and still stay healthy. We're working with farmers and utilities and cities to reduce what's going in These pollution budgets guide cleanup efforts and help bring your lakes and rivers back to life for wildlife, for your recreation, and for future generations. That makes a lot more sense. And I keep glancing a little bit at the chat. I love how someone said guilty, but we all are. We all do this. And if you look on the right, my kid is 8 years old. He's going to third grade later this fall. He can understand that, right? But also, like, I can understand that. Even I, who have been in this industry for a while, can't fully understand what's on the left. Like, at first glance, it takes my brain a lot of thinking to realize what that means. So last example for this strategy, nutrient management. So these non-point source pollutions, you might say, you probably have said, we're implementing nutrient reduction strategies through BMP adoption and priority. I don't know if you say HUC or HUC 12, whatever that is, subwater sheds to mitigate non-point source runoff and reduce hypoxia risk in downstream watersheds. Do you also see how, like, me even reading that out loud doesn't flow and isn't natural? That's because someone just wrote that. They would never verbalize that outwardly to anyone. Better way to say that, we all want healthy rivers and lakes that aren't overrun by algae or unsafe for swimming and fishing. We're helping landowners use better practices like planting cover crops or adjusting fertilizer timing to keep nutrients in the soil and out of the water. When we manage these smarter, we are improving water quality, we're strengthening farms, we're protecting entire ecosystems from small streams all the way to the Gulf. This explained why I care, what's cool about what you do, and a little bit about what you do, right? So, one place to use this is if you are in a big public meeting, right, where everyone is looking at you, like any of these guys, from the kids to the grandpas to the baby down there, then you might want to start with the CAP method, because they're already coming to this. If you see their faces like this, or you've had citizens comment and they're a little outraged, they're already coming to this from a high stressed area, whatever state, and their amygdala is in activation, and they can't hear your perspective yet. So this is the perfect place to use the CAP method. Although if the guy in the tie was coming at me, I would probably start with the security guard. Once he's contained, then I'd use the CAP method because that guy's a little scary, but we interact with people like that, right? So now when it comes to a situation where you need to more succinctly get across your point, this is the 2793 rule, and that's the one you're probably wanting to use. It's also rooted in brain science and crisis communication research from Dr. Vincent Cavello and the Center for Risk Communication. And remember, this is the one we're going to practice in the chat. So maybe go ahead and write down the numbers 27, 9, and 3. I repeat them for you, but be thinking about that as we explain how this works. And I swear it's easy. Well, it's hard, but the exercise is easy enough. So here's how this works. And this is based on some research that he did. So people can process no more than 27 words spoken in about 9 seconds with no more than 3 key pieces of information at a time, especially so when they're under stress or they're just unfamiliar with the topic, right? If you're talking to me about TMDLs, you really need to slow it down for me because that's not how my brain operates. So when to use this, I said earlier that some of these strategies I'm telling you contradict each other, right? Like this is really short, and the examples I give you are really short versus a little bit longer when I'm saying use that caring message first. And that's because what we'll talk about here in a minute in the next segment, based on your audience, you should be changing how you communicate. So not any one of these rules is like hard and fast. There are tools in your toolkit to pull out when you need them. So the 2793 rule, when you're doing an interview with the media or with whoever, if you're responding to a tough question at a public meeting, you really need to get across. Maybe, again, this is after citizens communication and all these thoughts and ideas and maybe some incorrect information has went out and the crowd is that's what's sitting on their mind. You could use 2793 to give them what is, again, the one thing rule. What is the most important thing you want to take them to take away and to kind of reset the conversation. You could also use it like in a blurb for your website or for a social media post. So in those kind of instances, this is the format we want to aim for. Oh, this slide was when I was supposed to be saying that. But oh yeah, also like TV or radio interviews, they want like talking points, right? Like key takeaways, quick hit social media captions, or just like when you're crafting core talking points or elevator pitches, and again in moments of like confusion or urgency. So especially useful for technical experts when you're trying to cut through the complexity in this kind of like high noise environment. So let's use a look at three examples using the same topics I did before, and then get ready because I am going to ask you to kind of practice this stuff. Practicing it is super important because it does sound simple enough when I explain it, but our brains don't automatically work this way. And until we practice it, it's really, really hard. So for water body assessment and monitoring, I might say we test local rivers to find out if they're clean, safe, and healthy, and restore the ones that aren't. This is 22 words. You can say it in about 8 seconds. And the three clear points are, hey, we test the water, check the safety, and we fix the problems. And that's pretty cool, I think, to realize like we got across three pretty critical points, super short and super quick. TMDLs, we calculate how much pollution a river can handle, then work with communities to bring it back to a healthy balance. That makes so much more sense than however you guys really want to word that. So 25 words, it's about 9 seconds. And my 3 points are we set the limits, partner with people, and we fix the problem, right? Restore the balance. Last one, nutrient management. We help farmers keep nutrients in soil and out of streams with protecting clean water, strong farms, and local wildlife. 23 words, about 9 seconds. I really like this one because you do actually get across a lot. Not only that you stop the runoff, you're protecting the water, and you're also supporting farming and wildlife. You said all of that in a really quick way. So I want to show you this in practice. This is from a utility in Pennsylvania, and they were just following with the lead and copper rule requirements that were upcoming. They were following some notice requirements and regulations, and so they sent out this. I don't remember if this was a door hanger or a flyer, but anyway, basically the primary purpose initially was to get people to check their own conditions of their pipes and report it in. But they started with and said, your regulation or regulations aren't changing, your quality water is not. What I love about this is that me as a consumer who like trusts my utility, I would read that and be like, all right, cool. Like, believe you, this is something I don't really need to look at because nothing to worry about there. Nothing's changing with my quality of my water, no harm. And then goes in deeper, like if someone is going to read further, hey, due to these regulations, we've got to comply with this. So all homes built prior to 1991 must have their service verified. And so then as a consumer, I'm like, oh, okay, get it. I'm just getting this because my home is like for 1991. I'm not getting this to be alarmed because there is anything wrong or I have lead pipes. So this is a place where I saw it in practice that I thought was really cool. Here's where I'm asking you to uh, play with me here, and this is the last time I'm going to ask you to do anything in the chat. So I will start a timer for 90 seconds. And if we can just practice the 2793 rule. So you could either do it on two topics, either tell me why community members should report pollution or spills, or you can explain why a fish advisory was issued and what people need to know. So let me put this up. We'll start it. Yeah, I'm going to request my colleagues keep their emails to less than 27 words. You should send this out to them. Emails are hard. It would be nice to have like a week where everyone had to keep their emails to the 2793 rule. If you're getting stuck when thinking about this, a really easy format is we do something to this is the benefit so that this is the impact. And if you're having trouble kind of thinking or don't want to be the first one to like put in the chat, it's uh, a good example to realize communication is hard. So I don't know if any of you online are actually the communications people at your entity, but a lot of times we don't value their work and just know a lot of strategy goes into it and it is hard. So the public is advised to not eat fish from the river for the next 24 hours because of bad stuff in the water. It's a great start and a funny start. Um, yeah, and I think it's good because, hey, like I just want to know, is this safe for me in something in a way that I interact with the water? So maybe I'm fishing there and eating those fish. And maybe we wouldn't say bad stuff. Maybe we'd figure out another way, but that was a really great way, that's non-technical. Uh, report water pollution or spills to prevent illness, protect human health, keep water clean. I love that because it's telling them, one, what you want from them, but two, like how it can impact them and why it would matter. Testing has found harmful chemicals in fish. Only eating, oh, it's moving so fast. 2 mils. Ah, okay, well, it's moving. So please report spills to keep your neighborhood safe so that the water stays clean. That's great, super quick and easy. Um, we recommend that you don't eat any fish from the big lake. Pollution spill has occurred, and we're not sure how it might impact your health. I think that what I love about that one, and then you guys can read each other's examples. But what I really love about that one, I think it was Tamara, is because sometimes we are so scared to get out there and communicate when we're not sure of the answer yet. We haven't investigated everything. We don't know what all of our response is. But some other science behind communication that I'm not going to talk about today is about how actually, I think I do talk about it a little bit later. But when there is no information out there and there's no communication, automatically our brains fill in that information with something negative and what's worse. Again, that is based on, I'll save the full explanation in case I do talk about later, but it's also based on science. It's based on our brains resorting to the primitive thing that it used to do to protect us. So we do have to get out there and communicate, hey, here's what we know now, and here's what we're doing, and we'll keep you updated. So really important to go ahead and do those messages early on, even though you're going to supplement that later with better information. Okay, so that was the first like big chunk of the communicating that we're going to talk about today. The next big chunk is going to be how to, now that we've talked about simplifying your message, how do we are talking about who we're talking to and how we change that based on who we're talking to. So we'll spend a good portion here, and then the last two, like I said, we'll kind of move quickly through. So this is a super cool tool that not enough people use. I would be super interested to know, and if you can put in the chat, if you already know, you probably don't, but you could ask later and find out, does your entity have audience personas or use audience personas? Companies should have these, organizations, government entities, like literally anyone should have these. And it helps us understand and leverage these personas, which are a tool for effective messaging. So often we see when we're talking with someone or we're like a type of person that we talk to, we see kind of above the surface, like job titles, education, maybe whatever visual demographics I can see. But we're not thinking about what's below the surface, their values, their fears, their cultural attitudes that help shape how they are receiving your message. So good communicators speak to both. So what is an audience persona? These, again, it's a tool that you can create, and I'll tell you in this how to create it. It does take some work, but again, these slides are here for you to reference later if you'd like to do it, or someone in your organization you want to forward to and they would like to do this for your group. But they're semi-fictional characters that you develop, but based on real facts from your target audience, right? So they're created using data and research from the different segments that you interact with. And the goal is that you talk to them when you're creating messages. Sorry, my camera keeps doing that. So used to, when I talked about this, when I talk to companies, I give them this slide. This is not the slide I'm going to give you guys. There's all this data behind like how this is better marketing, how this increases lead generation and more sales, and there's like research and data behind how you target and communicate to specific groups does that. But government isn't selling a product, right, per se, and instead we're asking people to believe us, trust us, and to act. And so there's also data behind why the importance of using personas help us do that. So greater public trust, when people feel seen and understood, they're more likely to trust the messenger. And that's science backed. More effective communication. So when we tailor our messages, it increases the retention of remembering that, and especially in the high stress or low trust environments that oftentimes, unfortunately, in this public health field, that's where we're operating. Regardless of whether your entity has ever done anything wrong or messed up or has a really great relationship with the community you serve. The data and polls and trends show that more and more just government institutions in general are not trusted, and that's just kind of where we're at in the field that we're operating in. And then the CDC's health communication playbook talks about public health campaigns that segment their audience and adapt the messages specifically to who they're talking to and the types of people they're talking to, achieve the better desired outcome. So whatever is you're trying to get them to do. So let's talk about how to create personas. And then I've created 3 for you guys, just to kind of illustrate how this works. So the first in 3 simple steps, later I have like 10 steps for you, but in 3 simple steps, you just do the research to gather data on what the demographics and beliefs and interactions of the people you're interacting with look like. In a second, I'll tell you about different ways and different sources you can go to find that for you specifically. Then you're going to segment that. So divide it into distinct groups based on their demographics or their different behaviors or the different needs that they have, right? So, for example, it could be the public, but instead of the public, it could be your set of volunteers that work with you. Probably going to talk to them differently than the community activist or the stream lake cleanup committee, right? We all have those. Or school students, maybe you're working with them a lot, or the city council, or whatever that looks like, right? Utilities. So you're going to segment those into the groups that make sense for you. Then we're going to get into creating these detailed profiles. You're going to create these characters. They're fake characters, but based on this real data. And you're going to name them. You're going to give them an age. You're going to come up with their whole backstory. And then I like to use AI to come up with a photo of them. Because again, I like to really use my personas and talk to them when I'm creating messages. So where are you going to start to get this information? Because I know like this is the hard part is like I can create a persona based on not facts and just my stereotypes and my judgment of like what I think, so how I think a community activist might behave or based on my experiences only with the community activist. But that's not going to be really as detailed as you need. And it's not really going to hit the market, right? Because it's going to be based off stereotypes. So here are 8 different ways that you can get some really good data to come up with this. So one, you guys are already having community listening sessions or public forums. People are talking during those. So take bullet point notes of what their concerns are, kind of the underlying, what are their values? What do they care about? And any like languages directly from residents. So when they're putting in public comments on regulations or notices, what are they saying there? And are there any trends? Interviewing your frontline staff, so your field inspectors, community engagement teams, whoever else is out there actually talking with these groups that you're trying to engage with, and just kind of get some anecdotes from them, right? Because they have the lived experience of what are you hearing, what's that firsthand knowledge. Another way is to partner with local organizations and NGOs. So these are places like the community groups that people already trust and go to. So you're just gonna like interview them too on their lived experiences. They again like have they're trusted intermediaries and they have these networks. So they could tell you a lot, and that could be one data point. So then like a big one that you're gonna go to is like demographic and behavioral data. You can get that from the census, Pew Research, CDC. If you're familiar with like Esri GIS stuff, like they have a lot of stuff out there. So get whatever that actual like data, demographic data of the area you serve is. And then, yeah, your social media and web analytics. So, on your own channels or like your partner organizations, this stuff will tell you a lot. I could do like a whole nother presentation on how to like get into it, but someone at your entity should, whoever operates the account, should know how to get into like the business center. It tells you the ages of who follows you, tells you when they're, what time of day they're online most. Um, do you have more females or males that follow you? Like it tells you a lot of this analytics. You can get that from your website as well. And then just kind of monitoring the news, how these issues that you're talking about being framed, what narratives are circulating. And then lastly, like if you really wanted to dig into this and like really get into it, you could partner with like a college or something like that, or even the community directly or a group, and they could like do some of this direct research for you. So that's how we're going to get the data. But going into actually creating the personas, the whole goal of this is like we really want to walk in the shoes of who we're talking to, who they are, what they do, why they do what they do, what they care about. Because again, all of the simplification, the messaging strategy I told you about, are based off what impacts them and why they care. How do you know why they care? Like if you don't, or what they care about, if you don't walk in their shoes. So here's the three that I created for you guys. So we've got Brad, Darlene, and Taylor. These next three slides are kind of an example of what a persona looks like. You could go deeper than I do in these three slides, but it's kind of deep enough if you wanted to do like a quick hit at this. So I've created photos for them. I've got names. So Brad, he's a skeptical suburban dad. He's 42 years old. I did realize after the fact that photo, that ages him a bit, but maybe he's lived a hard life. He's a in suburban St. Louis, HVAC tech, makes about 60 to 80,000 a year. And you've got Darlene, she's a community activist. She's a grandma. She's 68, lives in Fresno, California, retired teacher, makes about 25 to 40,000. And then you've got Taylor. He's a curious but cautious college student, 20 years old, goes to the University of Georgia in Athens, student, doesn't make a lot of money. So we know enough about them. I think even from there, we can kind of guess how we might communicate to each differently and how we might, like where and how we might communicate differently. But it would be based on speculation. So if we go a little further and develop based on the actual data that we have, figure out what are their goals, their motivations, what are they frustrated about? And then I like to really put myself in their shoes, come up with a quote of like what's something they would say to me at a public meeting or on the phone or out in the field. So you've got Brad. His goal, he just want to keep his family safe. He wants to be informed about what's in their water. Really, he's motivated by practical, non-nonsense information. It's something he can act on. He really feels frustrated with government messaging because it's vague, it's overly technical, or a lot of times he thinks it's sugar-coated. Brad might say to me, I don't trust government water data. Show me the local proof. So Darlene, her goal is to ensure that her neighborhood has safe and affordable water. She really feels a deep sense of responsibility to protect and uplift her community. She believes officials don't listen to or communicate clearly with her community. And she might say to me, I really care about clean water, but no one talks to my neighborhood. Taylor, he's an environmental science student, by the way, so he understands or wants to understand environmental risk just so he can make informed decisions. He really values transparency, the science behind the facts, and social responsibility. But he's overwhelmed by inconsistent information, hard to navigate resources, all these dashboards that we put out, and it takes 15 clicks to get through them, and then you've got to take 10 minutes reading the legend. That frustrates him. He might say to me, I just want to understand what's safe, what's not safe. So you think probably from there we're going even deeper or pretty deep, but like we need to go even deeper before we figure out how we're gonna reach each of those persons with a different message in a different way on a different medium. So when I'm trying to figure out, based on the data that I have, what's their personalities, who influences them, What kind of platforms are they already interacting on? Where are they getting messages from? What else are they interested in? It's probably not, probably none of these are going to say water quality data. And then again, where do they get their information from? So Brad's personality, super practical. He's very independent. He's protective of his family. He's influenced by his neighbors, by his coworkers, and he's all in those local Facebook groups that we either love or we hate. He also does like a lot of YouTubing, messages that Home Depot puts out. He frequents them a lot. So like he's reading those flyers and whatnot. And he's on the Nextdoor app. He's telling everyone their dog got loose. He's checking that every day. And his interests are do-it-yourself projects, sports radio, and grilling. Where he gets his news is the local news. He does read the mailers that come out. He's one of those people. And a lot of times, like he's looking up YouTube explainers when he's looking on how to do his do-it-yourself projects. So Darlene, she's very outspoken, but nurturing, justice-oriented. Her influences are really her church leaders, local nonprofits, these community groups she works with, and this neighborhood council of like trusted leaders and activists that she works with. She's on Facebook, she uses WhatsApp, and she watches Univision. Her interests are community events and education, her family's health. And sources of information that reach her the best are she goes to town halls. Again, she listens to like Spanish speaking radio and TV stations, flyers, and a lot of word of mouth in her community. I do want to touch on here when I say you could do this, you could skip the research step. And probably if I asked you to, if we had enough time to create a persona that you work with, you could do that based on anecdotes or your lived experience. But it is really important to get the data to make sure this is the most sound and useful to you. The reason this says word of mouth for her, so when I worked at a utility here in Arkansas, Southwest Little Rock for us is primarily Spanish speaking and primarily Hispanic. And so when I did some focus groups and some research and some data on how they were getting information, how they like to be interacted with, a lot of times it was through the women in the households and through a lot of word of mouth from friends and from flyers at restaurants and businesses that they trusted. So whereas I was used to like not really doing the kind of like in-person, like localized communication that way, this I went when I was trying to reach this group. I needed to go to the community centers and I needed to go to the restaurants and the grocery stores they were frequenting and put up flyers, which seemed really old school, but the data showed that's how this group I wanted to talk to got their information. So lastly, really quickly, Taylor, inquisitive, thoughtful, socially aware, listens to influencers on TikTok, climate activists, his professors. He's on Instagram, Reddit, and TikTok. His interests are sustainability and public health, civic engagement, and he's getting most of his info like on campus where he is through podcasts and on social media. So as examples, once you create these personas, it's really good to come up with like a summary statement of like what they're about, and then think about how you would interact with that group based on that persona. So Brad, we know he's always hands-on, middle-class dad who wants to protect his family, but he's wary of the government, reassurances, and really overwhelmed by all the scientific jargon. So I would want to probably use plain, direct language when I'm communicating with him, show him some local data or comparisons he can trust, and ideally probably through like a short video or a visual. And I'm probably going to share that in a neighborhood group because he's in all of those, Nextdoor, the Facebook group, whatnot. Now, Darlene is our retired teacher. She's a really trusted neighborhood advocate who champions environmental justice, but often feels overlooked by our official outreach. So the way I'm going to communicate to her is really through instead building relationships through trusted community and intermediaries. So I might go to the church or to the grassroots group that she's working with and use them indirectly to communicate to Darlene, ensure they have my materials, it's in all the languages, it's clear, and it has this empathetic tone because I'm relating to, I understand she feels overlooked and we haven't outreach to her community enough. This, I just want to point out, that's probably is the best way to reach her. Then you got to keep doing the work to go deeper. And as you continue to build these relationships, build them enough directly with this group so that targeted and direct information to her would actually work. And then quickly, Taylor again is our digitally native, savvy student, passionate about science and social impact, but frustrated that a lot of the communication from us isn't accessible and it's outdated. So I've got to meet him where he is. He's online, he's on campus. I've got to be more transparent and way more engaging. So short form video, infographics that link science to the everyday decisions that he is doing that relates to his life as well as environmental justice, right? Because that's what he cares about. Taking this quickly into some segments that you guys might Brad is hostile to us. Sorry, triggers our amygdala. That's true. Um, yeah, I think special advice on outreaching to him is understanding and validating yourself that you're frustrated too, calming, knowing that you're in your amygdala state and you're probably not giving your best response, and practicing the CAP method. The CAP method of caring first. Here's what I've learned for me. And again, I worked at a utility for 6 years and started with the outreach and then did government affairs, right? So then I'm talking to angry mayors, and that's difficult as well. But just understanding if we give the people we're working with, even when they're complicated, the benefit of the doubt, that there is validity in how they feel in some way. It doesn't mean all their facts are right. It doesn't mean like we think they should feel that way, but it is valid. Their feelings are valid. They're having those feelings. And once I kind of operate on giving them the benefit of the doubt and trying to start with that message that kind of brings them back down, that caring message that calms them, I found like we can get into things a lot better. So, real quick, like what you say to local news reporters isn't the same way you would talk to an elected official or to a homeowner. So, like the public wants to know how does this affect me, but elected officials probably want to know what's the cost and the benefit because that's what they're having to communicate. The media wants clarity, they want those quick quotes, right? So, with all audiences, you need to make it relatable. People don't remember statistics, they remember stories. So, use analogies. Compare it to an issue that they're familiar with, like baking a cake or driving a car. We see good communicators do this all the time, but a lot of times we don't take the time to relate our own messages that way. And then lastly, use visuals and use emotion. Stop, forget what we've heard that we don't need to bring emotion into our work. All of our work is about emotion. So these next slides I'm skipping through, but they're there for you of like steps that you need to take when you are building out those personas if you want to do that.
Chelsea, if I can stop you for 1 second, given that
Yep.
we've got about 30 minutes left, I think we've only had a few questions come through the chat, but if we can still keep about 10 minutes or so at the end, I think you
Yep.
can probably cut the social media part, but you can focus on what's coming up next. I think that's probably going to be the most valuable.
Yep.
Sound good?
Yep.
Great.
So we'll leave 10 minutes at the end and keep your questions coming if you have more as we go through. And Adam is flagging those for me because the chat gets hectic. These next two parts, again, are like not as intense or in depth as the other parts. And so they'll be super quick. So now that we've talked about tools for different ways to message, and now we know how to break down the difference in our audience and figuring out how to message what and how based on who they are and what they want. Now that means all of our messages are going to go super smooth, right? We know how to do it. We're going to do it well. We're going to follow everything we said, and no one's going to have any problem with that. I wish that's how that worked. But it is really important to know you can do everything right, absolute everything based on the science of how communicating works and how people receive it. And you're still going to deal with incorrect information. You're still going to deal with the brads that really irritate you. Um, and so you've probably dealt with this and you've seen it like from your own organization. You've seen people put out incorrect info, right? And it spreads fast. So common pitfalls in our water space. One, the safety fears, even if they're unfounded, right? We're dealing with public health. And so people fear what they don't understand. And it's good, again, even though it's hard, to understand that their feelings are valid, even if they're unfounded, because we are dealing with their public health, and that's super important. The next is like oversimplified memes or posts on social media. It flattens that nuance a lot. And then lastly, just this mindset narrative that we're government or we're like this big bad company and we're hiding something, right? That's the narrative people operate off of. Um, One of the examples I wanted to give here, I wanted to give, so this is one that happens all the time, again, in the utility space when there's a boil water notice or there's a big major like a weather event, people go say, "Hey, fill your bathtub up," and that is like it's contributing to the problem because if our water pressure is already down, or we don't like maybe our community doesn't have enough water for that to be happening, everyone's filling their bathtub up. They're draining our resources. If we have like a snow event, this happened a couple of years ago in the South, big snow event, all these main breaks that are draining our system, and then people were filling their bathtub up because Genevieve here from, and I kid you not, this is a real post. I just Googled fill up your bathtub. This was the first thing that came up, and it was from Deception Bay community. So I thought that was ironic. But Genevieve, she was looking out for residents or her community. Feelings are valid, but she just didn't have the right information, and that spread super quickly, right? These posts. Um, One notable example that we all here know is like back in 2023, East Palestine. There was this case where some people put out this map that and said like wrongly, they misleadingly, falsely suggest that it that the entire Ohio River basin, spanning parts of 14 states, was at risk of water contamination, when really they were just misinterpreting the map. So the reality was the map shows the land and the area draining into the Ohio River, not regions sourcing drinking water from it, and that contamination levels were detected below hazardous thresholds, and that diminishes downstream. But it didn't matter because this map was getting shared around everywhere. Important to know, like this happens so often that the Associated Press literally has a whole weekly roundup called Not Real News. So this happens all the time, not just in our industry. I do want to use this example because I think there was some good responses. And then when I get into what are like 6 great ways to combat disinformation, it's helpful to have an example that we can kind of talk about. But the Ohio EPA did a really good job when this was going on. And here are 5 things, to my understanding, like just from reading and hearing about it, that they did. So, one, putting out proactive public information. So they prioritize like rapid release of the accurate information to prevent the spread. They utilized digital platforms, putting it all over social media the best that they could, collaborating with other entities, including the federal agencies, to make sure that information was consistent from everyone and that everyone could help correct this. Then that community engagement and transparency. So efforts made to really engage directly with the community because they understood trust needed to be built there. And then just actively monitoring that and addressing it as it came up. So here are the 6 ways that there are other ways, but like 6 really things to focus on when we're dealing with this incorrect information. We're trying to combat it. So I'll go through each one by one. The first is called pre-bunking. So that's naming it early before it happens. This one is super hard to do because yeah, it would be like we would have to predict that that map was going to come out and go viral and be misconstrued that way. And it's hard to know. But this is one we could do in situations where we have some topic that like we know, maybe like swimming in the lake, and we kind of know where people's minds are going to go, maybe addressing it early and letting people know what's safe and what's not safe. So what it is proactively identifying and addressing the likely misconceptions before they arise. So the example here that we shared before the map came out, we could say, hey, you might see maps online that might look like contamination is going to be widespread, but remember, not all those basins are impacted. And why it helps is because it creates this psychological inoculation against misinformation, increasing the resistance to false narratives. So there's also science behind like the first information we get is often like what sticks in our head. So it's helpful to be out there first. Secondly, again, I told you the CAP method was my favorite, so it makes sense that it would come up again and again. But pairing fact with feelings, then again, this is Dr. Vincent Cavello's work and research. And it's just starting with the empathy before you start with your data, acknowledging what people care about first, and then going to into the factual assurances. So instead of saying something like contaminants are below threshold, say we understand how scary the situation feels because that's valid. That's why we're monitoring constantly, and so far the science shows the water's safe. People don't trust what they can't connect to. Again, this is all research backed. So next, use trusted community messengers. Um, this part is super important. So, for you, that could be the mayor, it could not be the mayor. You've got to know your community. Could be school leaders. Doctors are one that's a bunch of polls have found like people really believe and relate to. That might trend changing like as time goes on. The funniest example of this that I've seen is in New Orleans, like during some hurricane aftermath, they had the football coach come on and give like the press briefing of all like the safety information because there people listen to the football coach. So partnering with people who that your community already trusts. So having like the official do the video and say like, here's what we know, here's what we're watching, here's what to be safe. That's way more likely to go viral, to get shared online than that press release that you want to put out, that you still should put out, but you need to communicate in alternative ways as well. Visual correction. So makes a lot of sense like in this map case, but providing a visual that has like simple captions and the words on it, correcting whatever is wrong. So in this case, we could have like had the same map and then on there put something like this is the drainage basin, not the area where contamination has been detected. Water's being monitored carefully downstream. Um, just the same way, like those visuals, a lot of times in these memes are picking up traction, being shared because it catches people's eyes more. It's easy to share online. The same way you counteract that in the same way with visuals, but then that correct the information. A central message hub, super important. So this looks like any of the information you have, all your facts, all your myth busting, all your data, something that you're going to constantly keep updating. So like a central URL. So you could put that URL or the QR code on anything that goes out. So any of your partners' messages, your press conference, your flyers, send it to news outlets. So anytime anyone's interacting with this topic, they have access to that. And then there's one central space that you can keep updated instead of you having to update a bunch of spaces. It's really hard to keep track of. So anytime anyone's interacting with this topic, it refers them back to the central space that you control the message at. So that one's really easy and super important. I say easy, it's hard to, keep that all updated, but I just wanted to say here, it's also really good in that consistency of the consistent message is to have quick response sheets with like quick facts about whatever it is you're talking about and send that to all of your employees. I think too many times we only think about updating our staff that is directly talking with customers or the leaders like the CEOs or whatnot, the high level directors, but all your employees are getting questions like if you're in the news, their friends, their neighbors, their church members. So it's really important, like they're all kind of speaking on behalf of you, even unofficially. So it's super quick and easy way to keep them updated and keep that messaging that you want them to be saying versus how they try to explain it. So lastly, real-time myth busting and what this just looks like is as it's coming out, correcting it. So you might find a tweet that put the wrong map and say, hey, this is a misrepresentation. What this really shows is this, and here's what the science really says. And so this takes time, but again, it's based in the fact that the science that the first voice people hear often becomes that anchor. And so once the false narrative is out there, if it goes unchallenged, it's super hard to change. So you've really got to stay on top of it. Just put this in the slides for you as a quick summary. And then I'm gonna, the last 5 minutes, quickly run through. Totally understand some of you guys don't interact on social media. Maybe send this to your company's person in your company that does. But also, some of the concepts are relative, whether like you're the one posting or not. And even if you're not posting, you're in your neighborhood groups, like when this is coming up, talking as a neighbor, right? So some of these are still relevant. Why? Because 248 million people are online. That's 86% of Americans. They're on all the platforms. It's increasing year over year, right? So this is in the slide deck for you, and this is from American Waterworks Association's kind of toolkit called Trending in an Instance, and it's all about crisis communication and combating disinformation. So really, I think it's like 8 quick tips. Is you got to respond quickly. You can't leave it sitting out there forever. Use a human tone. Don't sound like a robot. Tailor your responses. Don't have a candid response that you copy and paste because people see that and it looks like you don't really care and you're just like hitting copy and paste, which you are. And then take responsibility. This one's really hard, but for example, if billing, I know this doesn't relate to you guys, but again, I work with utilities. If billing went out wrong and now you've corrected that and someone's angry about it online and you're responding to them, hey, I understand that's extremely frustrating. We're so sorry your bill went out wrong. The good thing is you don't have to do anything. We've mainly corrected it. It's going to be a credit on your account. But taking credit, because that makes you human, and people like just trust you more if you take that responsibility. Being visible, so don't like see these public trolls, these public comments and go privately respond. You need to publicly respond as much as you can. Sometimes it's sensitive information, but if Brad is out there making an angry comment, Chelsea might not make that angry comment, but I kind of agree with Brad. And if I don't see your response, I think you're kind of cold and like didn't address him. And now his mindset is kind of what I'm stuck with and what I'm seeing, thinking, unless I see how you responded to him. That being said, do respond publicly, but then try to move the interaction offline. Don't do a back and forth publicly. Have your one public response and say, Brad, would love to talk to you more about your specifics. Could you DM us so I can give you a call or we could have a chat? This number 7 is super big because it's something we don't think about and happens all of the time. Pause your other social media posts if a crisis is going on. So if a lake contamination happened and everyone's worried about it, and then at 2 p.m. it's like, hey, it's National Ice Cream Day. Our employees love ice cream, and here we are just smiling. You're going to look so insensitive, and it wasn't your fault, and you didn't think about it. So you got to make sure that people are on top of that and they're pausing those scheduled posts. And then lastly, just have conversations internally about who can post online and kind of what that strategy is. There's a summary for you. I'm going to skip over these next slides, but people connect with people. So yeah, Brad is getting a really bad rap. I'm sorry for all the Brads in the chat. I had a really great example here. I'm going to skip it, but like people love faces, right? So when I did this post for Central Arkansas Water, instead of putting the flyer, which I linked to in the post, I put Manessa, and it was just telling people that there are better ways than pay than staying stuck in that long line behind her. And that's going to be more eye-catching than anything else. So lastly, as we get ready for some questions, I would love to hear from you because this really helps me of like, what is the one takeaway of anything we talked about that might make sense in your work that you might use like in the next 90 days that is relevant? So whether that's my favorite, which is the CAP method, or it's the one thing rule, kind of the simplest, easiest one, the 2793. If someone does get everybody at their entity to email with just the 2793 rule for like a day or a week, I would love to know about that. Creating audience personas, combating incorrect information, and some of the social media stuff. To wrap up, science doesn't speak for itself, okay? We have to speak for it. And when we do it well, when we do it with clarity, with compassion, and with confidence, we can really help our communities act and we can build that trust. We can make that difference that our work is making. So thank you so much for being here. As you guys like kind of say in the chat, what is the biggest one takeaway? I want to tell you about this event that Rogue Water does that I've left the application deadline open for specifically just for you guys. It's called Catalyst. It's a 3-day summit. It's going to be in Milwaukee this September. And this is where we just dive deeper into everything that we talked about today. And we do it in really experiential ways and interactive ways. So we don't sit in a conference room, we don't look at PowerPoint slides. We're really like interacting, engaging through experience and through conversation. This year's theme is navigating this modern media landscape, all this noise that we talked about today. We'll have journalists there as attendees. We'll have utilities there. We have regulators there. We have people from the EPA, people from environmental nonprofits, environmental associations. So I'll put some links in the chat for you guys. There's a QR code, but I'll keep applications open till June 16th. Applications take 5 minutes, so it's really easy. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Adam. But thank you guys so much for letting me chat with you about all this today.